The House will come to order. Prayer by the chaplain.
God of all creation, we thank you for the gift of life this day and for the abundant blessings we enjoy here in the great state of Minnesota. We thank you for the lakes and forests, the rivers and prairies, for rich farmland and pastures, for healthcare and education, good neighbors and government, natural resources, and a productive economy. All good things that come from you, the author and giver of life. Gathered in this historic building today, we especially have reason to give thanks for the men and women who have accepted the call to serve the common good through elected office. Mindful of their great responsibility and the weight of their decisions, I pray that you would fill them with wisdom, discernment, and a spirit of cooperation. Keep them safe and guide them as they work for the well-being of all who call this state home. And finally, God, our creator and our sustainer, give us your power and help to promote and preserve our legacy of peace, prosperity, liberty, and justice for all. Amen.
The chaplain for today is Pastor Eric Sevig from Community of Cross Lutheran Church in Bloomington, Minnesota. Pledge of Allegiance. Please remain standing and recite the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. Quorum is present. The clerk will read the journal of the preceding day.
Journal of the House, 90th Session, 2018, 79th day, St. Paul, Minnesota, Monday, April 9th, 2018.
If there is no objection, further reading of the journal will be dispensed with, and the journal will be approved as corrected by the chief clerk. Hearing no objection, the journal is approved as corrected by the chief clerk. The member from Washington, Representative Diggins, for what purpose do you rise?
Point of personal privilege.
State your point of personal privilege.
Mr. Speaker, during the Olympics, I stood here and I acknowledged an accolade or an accomplishment of one of my constituents from Afton. And today, Jessie Diggins is here to receive those in person and show us her gold medal. I've got a House resolution that I'd like to read. It's a little long, but trust me, it's worth it. Stick with me. A House resolution congratulating Jessie Diggins of Afton on winning an Olympic gold medal in cross-country skiing. Whereas Jessie Diggins of Afton had high hopes of winning a medal in the 2018 Pyeongchang Olympic Games, she finished in the top 6 in each of her 4 Olympic events prior to the sprint relay and missed a medal in the 10-kilometer freestyle by only 3.3 seconds. Whereas Jessie finished 5th in the women's skiathlon and the highest Olympic finish to that point for a woman in the United States, 6th in the sprint and with a 3.3-second miss in the 10-kilometer race. And whereas on February 21st, 2018, Jessie and Keegan Randall won the women's team sprint freestyle race in Pyeongchang, out-sprinting more heralded teams from Sweden and Norway to become the first Americans to win an Olympic gold medal in cross-country skiing. Oh, there's more. Thank you, members, but we're not done yet. And whereas under the lights on a chilly but calm night at Alpenzia Cross Country Skiing Center, Jessie exited the final turn in 3rd place on the winding up and down track and took a massive risk, gambling on the widest turns and nearly 30 miles an hour. She momentarily drifted outside the track to create the space she needed to dart ahead of Maiken Falla of Norway. And whereas in the final straightaway, Jessie chased down Stina Nilsson of Sweden and outstretched her at the finish to win by 19/100ths of a second. And whereas the Americans' winning time of 15:56.47 in the final was a 26-second improvement on their semi-final heat, which they won in a time of 16:22.56. And whereas they are the first American cross-country skiers to medal at the Olympics since Bill Koch took home silver in 1976, and the first American women to win a medal of any kind in cross-country skiing, an outstanding accomplishment deserving of special legislative recognition. And whereas Jessie also received the honor of carrying the United States flag during the closing ceremony. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration of the House of Representatives of the state of Minnesota that it congratulates Jessie Diggins of Afton on winning an Olympic gold medal in cross-country skiing. And it's signed Speaker Kurt Dowd, Joyce Pepin, Chair of the Rules and Legislative Administration, State Rep Tony Jurgen. Jessie's family is also here. I'd like to recognize them and introduce them. Her father, Clay Diggins. Her mother, Deb Diggins. And her sister, Mackenzie Diggins. Mackenzie, go on up. Mr. Speaker and members, thank you very much.
Reports of standing committees and divisions. A copy of this order of business has been placed on each member's desk. If there's no objection, the reports will be adopted. Hearing no objection, the reports are adopted. Second reading of House files.
Second reading of House File number 1415.
Second reading.
Second reading House File number 2835.
Second reading.
Second reading House File number 3023.
Second reading.
Second reading House File number 3280.
Second reading.
Second reading House File number 3610.
Second reading.
Second reading House File number 3833.
Second reading.
And second reading House File number 3837.
Second reading. Introduction of bills. The following House files have been offered for introduction today. The Chief Clerk will report the House files and give them their first reading.
Introduction of first reading of House Files 4346 through 4404.
First reading, House Files 4346 through 4404. Report from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration.
Peppin from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration, pursuant to Rules 1.21 and 3.33, designates the following bills to be placed on the calendar for the day for Thursday, April 12th, 2018, and establishes a pre-filing requirement for amendments offered to the following bills. House File numbers 2899, 3755, 3224, and 3095. Peppin from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration, pursuant to Rules 1.21 and 3.33, designates the following bills to be placed on the calendar for the day for Monday, April 16th, 2018, and establishes a pre-filing requirement for amendments offered to the following bills. House File numbers 2887, 3841, 3243, and 3295.
Calendar for the day. The first bill on the calendar for the day is House File 2899. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 2899, number 1 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to insurance, the first engrossment.
Recognize the member from Stearns, Representative Howe, to introduce your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, House File 2899 is a bill to help contractors and homeowners understand what the current law is. Right now, if your home is damaged and needs repair, the insurance company normally pays for those repairs less the deductible. The homeowner and the insured pays that deductibles directly to the contractor. Many times what contractors are finding that homeowners, the insured tries to get the contractor to include that or deduct that or include that in their bid, in their initial estimate. That is strictly prohibited by state statute, and it's illegal. So what this bill does is require the contractor to provide written notification to the homeowner of that statement that says it's illegal, that the deductible is not included in the estimate. Also, the insurance company has to, or the adjuster has to provide that written notification also. That's the meat of the bill. That's what it does. It just requires the contractor and the adjuster or the insurance company provide written notification to the homeowner of the statute that says they can't pay that they're required to pay the deductible. And I'll stand for questions, Mr. Speaker.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 2899.
Third reading. Discussion on House File 2899. Discussion on House File 20. You sure know how to clear a room there, Howe. Any discussion? House File 2899. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Clerk will close the roll. There being 127 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 3755. The clerk will report the bill.
House File Number 3755, number 2 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to watercraft, the first engrossment.
Recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Hertaus, to introduce your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Mr. Chair, House File 3755 is known as Sophia's Law that we had passed in 2016 to become effective 2017. Last year, we recognized in incorporation of the language of the American Boat and Yachting Council that there were circumstances which went beyond our intention with this law as it relates to the houseboat industry and the resort industry and rental boats. And so what this bill does is corrects that language and makes it less onerous for the fleet industry of renting houseboats from having to have too many of these devices on their watercraft. Mr. Speaker, this was a first in the nation law with regard to boating safety, and this bill has been recognized by the National Association of Boating Safety Law Administrators as being such, and other states around the nation are now following Minnesota with this. Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank Bob Meyer of the Department of Natural Resources, and also Representative Eklund has been instrumental in helping to get the changes made in this bill. So with that, I'll remain for any questions.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 3755.
Third reading. Discussion on House File 3755. The member from Couchiching, Representative Eklund.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members, and I want to thank Representative Hertaus for this bill. It's my pleasure to be a co-author on it, so thank you, Representative. I brought my concerns that were brought to me from the hospitality houseboat rental industry, and Representative Hertaus and the DNR and the American Boat and Yacht Association were very instrumental in helping us come to the right conclusion on this bill. We were able to get together and address these concerns, and this is a good bill. I urge members to vote green. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 127 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 3224. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 3224, number 3 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to credit unions, the first engrossment.
Recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Jessup, to introduce your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This bill before us is from the credit union. It regards their internal management of how they operate. They have some changes that they want to put forward really as good best practices. The first is regarding cause for expelling a member from a credit union. Their laws today are rather vague. They want to update those laws so that if someone is stealing from the bank, if someone is physically or verbally abusing another individual, that they have cause to expel that member from the credit union. Second, they are changing their laws such that giving the board governance in terms of a 2/3 majority. If they need to change their certificate of organization, let's say like a credit union needs to change their address or their name for some particular reason. And also the bylaws. If they need to make a change, they can do so with a 2/3 majority of their board members. A third final change is that the delivery of any communication to members could now occur by email as well as mail. That is the content of this bill, and I appreciate your support.
There are no amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File number 3224.
Third reading. Discussion on House File 3224. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 127 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 3095. The clerk will report the bill.
House File Number 3095, number 4 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to solid waste, the second engrossment.
Recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Smith, to introduce your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members. This bill amends Chapter 11A.94, the Organized Waste Collection Statute. While this area of the law often produces vigorous debate, this bill is a consensus bill. For nearly a year, the haulers and the city, the League of Minnesota Cities, have met, and they've produced some amendments, some changes to the broad changes from the 2013 bill. This bill has no opposition. This bill was passed unanimously out of Civil Law and the Environment Committee. This bill makes the process better. There's common sense reforms, and this provides for a smoother process for the haulers and the cities. I ask for a green vote. Thank you.
There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Nelson moves to amend House File Number 3095. The second engrossment as follows, and the amendment is coded A3.
Recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Nelson, to introduce your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, what my amendment does, and first off, Mr. Speaker, could I ask for a roll call?
Roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And what my amendment does is it just, as they're going through the process, that they give preference to contractors that have organized labor working for them. That's what the bill does. We are here on the floor. We want to make sure we promote good, solid paying jobs, good paying jobs that provide benefits like health care, pensions, and that's what this would allow the bill to do, and this would allow these people to have a good paying jobs. And members, I'd ask for your support.
Discussion on the Nelson amendment. Member from Hennepin, Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members. I ask you to oppose this amendment. This bill represents an agreement worked on by all the parties, and we want to respect their hard work over the past year. Adding this provision goes against the purpose of these reforms, which is to add transparency, ensure communities are getting the most efficient and effective options for collection. I ask for a no vote. Thank you.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Hortman, to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise to speak in favor of the Nelson Amendment. You know, the difference in having union labor is clear, and the strength translates not only to those families, but into our communities. We know that families who participate in a labor union have health insurance at a rate of 79%, whereas the average is 48%. We know that 79% of union laborers have a pension, whereas only 16% of non-union laborers do. We know when we take a look at paid sick leave, so somebody can take some time off and care for a loved one when that person is ill and return to a job with the security that it will support their family, 83% of union workers have that, only 62% of non-union employees do. And the median weekly wages of union families is $200 a week higher than non-union families. We want strong communities, strong families, and members, I hope you'll support the Nelson Amendment.
Any further discussion on the Nelson amendment? Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 50 ayes and 77 nays, the motion does not prevail and the amendment is not adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 3095.
Third reading. Discussion on House File 3095. The member from Hennepin, Representative Slocum.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is it too late for me to ask a question? That was awfully quick. Okay, good, good. Representative Smith, I have a question for a couple of them, actually. That 2013 bill, that was mine. I loved that bill. That organized hauling was one tough haul, shall we say. Anyway, I have a couple of questions about the changes you're making here. The first question is to develop the proposal dividing the city into zones. You extended the time from 60 days maximum to at least 60 days with no maximum. Does that not slow down the process?
He will yield. Representative Smith.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Representative, I would submit to you that in these complex negotiations, more talk is better. And the idea behind that all the parties involved got behind, is that why limit it to that number? We should have at least that amount of time, the 60 days. It provides for a better outcome and a better process for all involved.
Representative Slocum.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I would like to see a limit. I don't care if the limit would be extended past 60 days, but I would really like to see a limit because I think it's a way to allow either stakeholders or haulers to stall the process. And environmentally, it's such a good process for cities to have and use that I think it would be nice to have I'll look at that for maybe next year. I have a second question, Mr. Speaker.
He will yield. Representative Slocum.
Who's yielding? Are you yielding or?
The bill author is going to yield to your question. You have the floor, Representative Slocum.
I was
Feel free to
addressing
ask, and
you.
I'll get him to
Okay.
respond for you.
All
I'll
right.
compel him to respond.
Thank you. Okay, Representative Smith, my other question is the stakeholder group. It concerns me, and I know it wasn't in my original bill. It must have been short-sighted on my part, but I think we need some specifics on who's in that stakeholder group, because I could see it being heavily weighed either in the haulers' part and favor or in a specific interest group of consumers. And we needed to be a cross-section of pretty unbiased people to do justice to this. So that's another thing that I'd like to see us work on for maybe next year.
Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative, I dispute the premise of your question. Your legislation in 2013 did not miss anything. It was a fine piece of legislation. This amendment is meant to only complement what has already previously been done. And to that point, the language was particularly vague for this particular area. So because each of the cities, the 681 cities, they may want or require different types of people to be involved. So certainly to your concerns, that is something we should look at and talk about amending in the future. But I think this bill represents what the parties are really interested in at this point. Thank you.
Representative Slocum.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is actually a question for Representative Smith. I just got a piece of paper here, adding to my pile of papers, from the National Waste and Recycling Association. And I'm curious, and they are in support of the bill, and I worked with them also, and I can't quite remember if the ma and pa haulers are a part of that group, and if the ma and pa haulers are in are in support of this bill, or if it's just the larger mega haulers that are often based out of state.
He will yield. Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative, this agreement represents all the haulers in the state. Thank you.
Representative Slocum.
I'm done now. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Any further discussion on House File 3095? The member from Hennepin, Representative Carlson A.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A question for Representative Smith. First of all, thank you so much for your efforts in working with both the cities and the haulers on this. I know there was a tremendous amount of work. You're bringing together a variety of stakeholders in a very important effort. In your opening comments, you made the point of saying that this will make the process work better, and I do believe that, having read now through the letters of support both from the League as well as from the waste haulers. But in your opinion, would you say, what would be your take in terms of the likelihood that this would encourage municipalities to pursue organized collection?
He will yield. Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative, I cannot speak for that because this bill does not impact any local municipality from making that decision. That is their decision alone. This is simply a framework for them to work within if those local organizations, those local forms of government decide to do so.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Mahoney.
Will the author yield?
He will yield. Representative Mahoney.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Smith, I am just wondering, and I want it on the record, although what we say on the floor doesn't really count much in the court of law anymore. Your bill, if a city is in the process of negotiating a municipal hauling contract, will your bill affect it if they are not done by, I think it's 1/1/19, or if they are in the process of, so that's one question. I'll ask the second one in a minute.
Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative, this bill is effective on January 1st, 2019. So that date was specifically chosen because there are a couple of cities that are in the process right now. It was meant to give them enough time to wrap up those discussions and that agreement, therefore starting fresh on January 1st, 2019. This bill is meant to be prospective and not impact any city's negotiations going on now. Specifically, to your question, if an agreement is not signed and it does carry over into January 2019, then this agreement, this addition to the bill, to that area of the law would become in effect.
Representative Mahoney.
Would the author of the bill yield for another question?
He will. Representative Mahoney.
I apologize. My leash decided to call me, and I'm going to ignore it. So, from what I can partake from what you said is that there's only two other municipalities looking to do municipal hauling at the present time. That's what I inferred from your a couple municipalities trying. My worry is that if somebody starts this June, because I know in St. Paul it took at least 2 years, if not 3, of negotiating and meetings and everything else. It's a long process. And your bill, if someone starts, there's no reason to start, if they haven't already, until next year. Is that what this bill does? So it stops all the negotiating if they're in it right now, or if they're not going to be able to get it done before the first of the year, they may as well stop right now.
He will yield. Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative, let me be clear, Representative. To my knowledge, of the 853 cities, I think that there's 2. I certainly don't mean to say that that is a definitive number. There very well could be more, but there's a couple that I know of. And to your point of, should they stop the negotiating, I would say no. This bill has been worked on, as I mentioned before, for about a year, and the issues in here, the league's been very well versed, and I would stand to gather the belief that any city working through this issue now is aware of what the league was agreeing to in the past year. Therefore, they had the last year as well as the rest of this year before the new agreement would become enacted into law. And I think this is a good bill. This is a good amendment. So if someone needed to operate their new operating agreement format underneath the rules of this, I think that's for the betterment of all involved.
Representative, any further questions or discussion on House File 3095? Any further discussion? Representative Smith, would you like the last word? Member from Hennepin, Representative Smith.
Mr. Speaker, members, I appreciate your support. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 108 ayes and 18 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. Motions and resolutions. There are copies of the non-controversial motions at the House desk and online. If there's no objection, we'll take action on these motions first. Hearing no objection, the motions prevail. There is a motion at the desk. The clerk will report the motion.
Hanson moves that House File number 2887, now on the calendar for the day, be re-referred to the Committee on Environment and Natural Resources Policy and Finance.
Recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Hanson, to your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd ask for a roll call on the motion.
Roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill on the calendar for the day for Monday is the bill for an act relating to prohibiting certain rules related to nitrogen fertilizer. The rules were designed to protect water quality. Water quality is in the jurisdiction of the Committee on Environment and Natural Resources. I think it's important for this bill to come to Chair Fabian's committee and for an analysis of its impact on protecting water quality. So I'd ask for your support to move this bill to the Environment Committee.
Recognize the member from Traverse, Representative Backer, to the motion.
Mr. Speaker and members, this deals with in the provision of MDA, the Department of Agriculture. I've talked to Chair Fabian. He does not need to hear it per his request. So it is at the right location. Thank you, members. I would ask you not to support the change.
Any further discussion? The member from Dakota, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Water quality affects us all. It is part of our environment. It's often better to hear things in a couple spots rather than just one location before we come to the floor, to test out, to look at the science, to look at the research on how fertilizer can impact water quality. So it is prudent and appropriate to send this to the Environment Committee for further vetting and look at the consequences of either doing the rules or not doing the rules. I ask for your support for the motion.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the motion. The clerk will close the roll. There being 50 ayes and 76 nays, the motion does not prevail and the bill is not re-referred. Announcements. The member from Hennepin, Representative Hornstein, for what announcements? Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted the body to know that today is Yom HaShoah, that's Holocaust Remembrance Day in Hebrew, and there is a special commemoration tonight, if you don't have Ways and Means Committee, at 7 p.m. at Mount Zion Synagogue, which is just up the road, 1300 Summit Avenue. Near the corner of Summit and Hamlin. So I'd encourage you to go if you don't have plans. It's a very moving evening, and it's very important, again, for all communities to remember this, the Shoah, the Holocaust, that we do on this very special day once per year on the Jewish calendar. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Carlson. Announcements.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, the DFL members of the Ways and Means Committee will meet immediately after session in room 272.
The member from Sherburne, Representative Knobloch. Announcements.
Mr. Speaker, members, the full Ways and Means Committee will meet at 5:15 in room 200 to take up a number of bills and the budget targets. 5:15.
Any further announcements? Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I move that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 3:30 p.m. Monday, April 15th, 2018. 2018. Oh, excuse me, Monday, April 16th, 2018.
Representative Pepin moves that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 3:30 p.m. Monday, April 16th, 2018. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails. Representative Pepin.
I move that the House do now adjourn.
Representative Pepin moves that the House do now adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails and the House stands adjourned until 3:30 p.m. Monday, April 16th, 2018.